similar interests. So thank you again for taking my course. I'm just signing in, letting the last few people into the class. And the course is divided into 5 lessons, as you know, 1 hour each during a happy hour. And I've said it several times, if you want to have a glass of wine or a drink while we're doing this, that's fine by me. I won't have a problem with that. And again, the rules of the game here is feel free to interrupt, jump in, ask questions, ask for clarifications, tell a story. I'm happy about that. It makes the whole experience more fun. Do you have any questions before we start? Nope.
Nope.
Okay. I have a question for you. As I'm sharing my screen with you, and on my screen I see a little green tab. Do you see that while I'm playing around with these buttons on my screen? You don't. Okay, that's good. All right, so let's get right on with it. So today's lesson is basically an introduction. If you look at all the beekeeping courses out there that are offered, they often start with a look at honeybee biology, and you know, the hive. What is a hive made up of? These are the hives we created to keep our bees. So it's a good place to start. It's important to know about honeybee biology before you start beekeeping, because it helps you understand what you're doing, and it gives you more confidence in manipulating the hives, the bees, in order to reach certain objectives, if you know about their biology. So let's dive right into that. But actually, before we dive into that, maybe one of the things we could do is just look at the history of beekeeping quickly. I think it's quite fascinating, and there are evidence of humans collecting honey for a long time. The pictures I found here are on the oops, this is my last participant. Welcome. You can find these online. The picture on the right is from cave paintings in Spain. They're dated to about 26,000 years ago. And on the left, these are more Egyptian hieroglyphs or Egyptian inscriptions of 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. We've been doing this for a long time. So if you want to keep bees, be confident that you're following in the footsteps of people who came before you for tens of thousands of years. Mostly because honey is perhaps the only thing you can find in nature that is so naturally sweet. And of course, human beings, we love the sweetness, and we've risked our lives for thousands of years to have access to it. Candy, basically. Beekeeping is also a hobby that pays for itself. You know, there's a lot of hobbies out there that don't pay for themselves. I don't know if anybody plays golf out there, unless you're really good at it. You know, it could be an expensive hobby, whereas beekeeping, quickly, once you've put out your first investment in equipment, within a year or two, you are coming out into the green. You're no longer in the black. You're no longer in the red. And if you enjoy that kind of thing, it's part of the fun of it. Some people like to go to fairs, local fairs, and sell their honey, like this woman is doing here. It gives you a chance to talk to people, meet the neighbors and whatnot. It also helps you connect with nature. This is perhaps something that I've felt keeping bees. You know, you have to go see your hives on a regular basis, and sometimes you can just sit there and enjoy the whole environment. The bees are working, they're bringing in pollen. Invariably you go out there on a nice day, and depending on where your hives are located, of course, if they're on a rooftop of a building in downtown Ottawa, it wouldn't be quite the same thing. But if they're out somewhere in nature, it's just a pleasant experience. Beekeeping is also a great icebreaker. I don't know, I haven't been to a cocktail party or any such type of event in a long time now, as many of us probably haven't had the chance to do that either. But, you know, if somehow you're with a group of people, with some friends, whatever, I don't know what your respective jobs are, or some of you I know are retired, but if you have the chance to meet people, and word gets out that you keep bees, trust me, you'll have 1,000 questions. So once you say that, the people will be very curious, and there you go. There's no need to worry about what to talk about anymore. And it's also a lot of fun. You know, you're working with these little insects. They're giving you honey, and it's not, you know, if you don't get into it in too serious a way, if you're not starting to get into 6 or 10 or 20 hives, it could be something that doesn't take too much time. There's a nice annual cycle to it. and you can bring people with you to help you out, and you have this nice product at the end. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy that. So let's talk about honeybee biology. I know someone on this course is someone I know, a woman called Andrea, and she's like an evolutionary biologist. She studied the evolution of animal species. She knows a lot about this, so I have to be careful what I'm saying here. She might jump in and tell me I'm wrong. And Andrea, if you're hearing me, just feel free to do so. Honeybees are a social insect. Social insects means that these insects live together in socially structured colonies. They have different roles. There's different castes out there. There are different types of honeybees, as there are different types of ants. I use ants here as an example. We're familiar with the ants. There's the worker ants, the queen who lays eggs and whatnot. And in such species, individuals belong to what we call castes. And for the bees, there's 3 particular castes. We've all heard about the queen bee. A funny story, until fairly recently, I would say 150 years ago or so, 200 years ago, it was commonly believed that perhaps there were a few smart people out there who looked at things closely, but it was commonly believed that the queen bee was actually a king bee. And this is in the societies that we lived in Europe, where there are a lot of monarchies with a king in charge. The not so serious researchers would see the queen and call it the king, and they try to make parallels between how the hive was organized and how society was organized. You have the king, and then you had a lot of workers out there, right, who followed the king and then listened to the king, kind of thing. These are interesting ways of looking at things. We know better today that these are queens. How do we differentiate a queen amongst all the other bees? Well, she has a very large abdomen. In this picture, well, you'll see other pictures, but there is quite a large abdomen there. And I could ask you the question, why do you think she has a large abdomen? Does anybody venture to give me an answer to that?
All her eggs.
Correct, Judy. Congratulations. You get a star, okay? She lays a lot of eggs. She could be laying thousands of eggs, 1,000 eggs a day. And so that is an egg making a machine, very active, high metabolic rate. She needs to be fed a lot when she's laying eggs. There's usually just 1 queen per hive. On exceptional circumstances, there will be 2. We can talk about that later. A queen can live for 3, 4, even more or longer. Queens can last for several years. It's interesting to note she only goes on a 1 mating flight when she's first born, and then that lasts her for several years in terms of fertilizing eggs as she goes along. And she very rarely leaves the hive. Under exceptional circumstances, she does. We'll talk about that. What does she do? She lays eggs. And she establishes new colonies by heading out in a swarm. And we'll talk about swarms a little later today. So that's part of honeybee biology, is the swarming aspect of things. All beekeepers, one of your main jobs will be to watch out for swarms and decide how you want to handle that. It's your choice on how you want to manage your swarms. So after the queen, we have the worker bee. This is the one that does all the work. She's a sterile female. She almost never lays eggs, and there are exceptional circumstances where worker bees will lay eggs, and we'll talk about that later, although her eggs will not be fertilized, and so it doesn't result in a viable colony. You have a lot of honey worker bees in a hive, up to 50,000. So, in this cocktail party I was telling you about, you could say, you can start your conversation by saying, yes, I have a farming operation. I have 50,000 head in my operation. People think you're one big farmer. And worker bees in the summer, they work very, very hard. They're always out there. The first several days of their lives, they're stay inside the hive, they're taking care of the brood, they're cleaning and defending, but as they get older, they'll start going out on runs to go and find pollen and nectar. And they fly, they may fly a few thousand kilometers in a lifespan, these little bees on those little wings. And typically that means they burn out. They just burn out after several weeks in the summer. The winter bees will last a lot longer though. The bees that are born in September or October, they have a slightly different metabolism, slightly different developmental phase when they're a larvae in the pupa. It allows them to survive the winter a lot longer. The queen will stop laying eggs in September, October, and the bees that she ends up with in her colony are with her for the whole winter. So what does a worker bee do? Worker bee gathers nectar, pollen, and propolis. We'll talk about propolis a little later. The worker bee feeds and tends to larvae. So, you know, in the hive is almost always larvae out there and needing to be fed. The worker bee cleans and defends the hive. So hive it's important to keep it clean so there's no infections happening, no transmission of disease, but also defend it. We've heard last summer big stories about the murder hornets, the giant Asian hornet, which has sadly arrived in North America recently and does a good job in attacking honeybee colonies. So these worker bees would be the ones out there trying to defend against such predators. Other predators include skunks or raccoons or mice or even bears. The honeybee will make wax, a very important part of the job. And the worker will build and repair comb. And they'll also work in hive, maintaining the proper environmental conditions inside the hive. It could be temperature, maybe humidity. So they do that as well. So it's quite a long list of a long job description for the worker bee. It's no wonder they don't survive that long. They work themselves to death in the summer. And then we have the last of the three castes, the drone. And one of the things you notice the most about the drone is the huge eyes. I mean, the head looks like a bowling ball with some antenna on it. And that's, why would the drone, you think, have huge eyes like that? Does anybody have any suggestions? Judy, you seem to be full of answers tonight.
No idea on that one.
Anyone else venture?
I'm going to guess that it's to find a queen.
Michael, that's you, Michael. I think someone else threw that in. Yes, the drone has to find the queen. So what's the, I see all your faces now. Do you see that on your screen when I show all the faces on my screen? You do?
No, I'm
you
not.
don't?
Push it.
Okay, just to be sure that I just want to. So yes, the drone is a fertile male. There are only a few hundred per hive. And they're typically only present from spring to early autumn. Though I have to say, I was visiting my hive just a couple of days ago and I saw a drone flying around. You know, on the weekend it was I wouldn't say warm, but it was about 0 degrees and a few little bees were flying around and I saw a drone. I was very surprised. I didn't think there were any there in the winter. And I did some further research and I learned that they may hang in there. Some of them may survive through the winter, or there may be some in the hive in the winter. So it's not completely unheard of to have them in the hive after the autumn. So what are the jobs? Well, after we saw the job of the female, the worker bee, you know, there's a long list. Now the drone's job is basically to mate with the queen. That's it. It's a good life. They're born, they hang out in the hive, they eat, they're tended to by the worker bees, and on nice sunny days, they fly off, and they, through some mysterious process, they find these drone gathering areas somewhere outside, somewhere in the field or in a little meadow, and they tend to gather there. And when if a queen is born and needs to mate, she will leave her hive and also find these same areas. There's something about these areas that attracts bees. So she'll fly to that area, and if the drones are over there, they'll see her and they will mate with her in mid-flight. Several drones will mate with the queen over a short period of time. And once the queen has had her fill, she heads back to the hive, and that's that. She doesn't need to fly again. And the drones who do mate with her, they die, sadly for them. So, but their evolutionary destiny has been fulfilled. So here's a bit of a diagram of their respective sizes and shapes and the physiological differences of the three castes of bees. The queen being quite large, big abdomen, the worker being the small one, and the drone with the big eyes and a you often hear a reference to a bullet-shaped abdomen. So, when you first open up a hive and look at the bees, you're saying, oh my God, they all look the same to me. But a quick inspection, you can start spotting drones fairly easily. And the queen, of course, there's only one per hive and can be quite difficult to find. In my experience, I don't know, last summer, I had 6 hives over the summer, opened them all up several times. And I think I spotted queens 2 or 3 times. And I don't really look for them that hard. But it's not something you spot too often, unless you really try to. So what happens? What's the honey? Any questions? Any questions? I have a very quiet group tonight.
I do have a question about the drones. I know in bumblebees, they don't come with a stinger. Is that the case also with honeybees?
That's right. The drones don't sting. So you're good. So, when you're handling bees, some people will mark the queen. They will find the queen, pick her up with their fingers, and put a little dot of color on her thorax, on the back side of her thorax, so that you can easily spot her, and also you can age her that way. And they always say practice with the drones first. Pick up drones with your fingers; they won't sting you. So that's the drones don't sting. The queen stings, and her barb does not stick in your fingers, so she can sting repeatedly. Whereas the worker bee, could sting only once. So here you have a picture of a comb. You see my cursor when I move it around? You see my cursor under the word eggs? Yes? Okay. So here you have a comb with a little white speck there. Those are eggs. They look, and here's a blow up of that same image. They're shaped like a grain of rice, but they're tiny. They're very small. They're maybe, 2 millimeters long. And so when you're out there on a hot day and you're opening up your hives, you may have your protective gear on, and one of the things you like to do often is look for eggs. Because if you see eggs, it's evidence that the queen has been laying fairly recently, and that's a good sign. But it's never easy to see those eggs. You really have to look hard sometimes. The sun might be casting shadows and whatever. It's always a bit of a frustrating thing to see the eggs.
Well, the eggs are not capped, like they're just.
Yeah, at first the cells are wide open. The worker bees will clean the cells, make sure they're nice and clean. Then the queen comes along and she'll lay the eggs. And the sign of a healthy queen is when she lays a nice, good pattern of eggs. She doesn't miss any cells, right? Every cell has an egg. If you get a queen who's getting older or maybe it's sick, she'll be laying eggs here and there, and you know that it's time to do something about that. So an egg will sit there for 3 days, and then it will, like anything, hatch, like any egg, hatch into a larvae. Now, in this picture, you see larvae of different ages, right? You see very tiny larvae right here between the 2 bees. And I look at that as that's a larvae that's probably just a day or 2 old. It's just hatched recently. And then you have fatter and juicier larvae until these guys here, the big ones here, are probably 9 or 10 days old, about to be capped. Once they hit about, I think it's 9 days, they're capped. So those are larvae. And we see human beings, we see larvae, we may think, oh, that's gross, it looks like a maggot, we think of flies and garbage, but it's just a different form of a caterpillar. We see caterpillars, we think they're cute, and larvae, we think they're gross. It's unfortunate because it's the same basic developmental phase for insects. I taught a few on-site courses over the summer with some kids, and I would say that the bee larvae, they're lucky because they just sit inside their little cells, and the worker bees come and feed them honey and royal jelly, and they have a good life. They just sit there and eat. They don't have to worry about anything, whereas caterpillars, they have to eat leaves, which is not very tasty, and they're always at risk of being eaten by birds and whatnot. So the honeybee larvae have the good life.
So why do they cap them?
Oh, that's a good question. Capping the larvae is basically the equivalent of a caterpillar spinning its cocoon. One point it needs to change into an adult bee, and it does that within its cocoon. Why can't they do that exposed to the air? I don't know. That's a good question, but that's what I would venture to say all insects do when they metamorphosize from a larvae to a pupa to an adult. So your name is Firecat. I don't have your
Oh, I need to update that. It's Shauna. Sorry.
Hi, Shauna. It's okay. It's okay. It's easy to do. You know, you just click.
I did that, but it hasn't updated today. I'll probably
Right,
do
okay.
that for the next session.
Okay, it's okay. Don't worry. I'll just call you Firecat. Okay. So the larvae stage is there, and then once the larvae reaches 9 days old, they get capped, as we spoke about, and within that, once they're capped, they will turn into a pupa. They'll metamorphosize, right? You heard that word in the high school biology. They go from a larvae to they change shape completely into getting into an adult bee. That takes several days. And here's a picture of a capped frame, capped brood. So you see below in these cells, you'll see some larvae. There's still some larvae there. Here's a big fat one, old larvae. It's about to get capped. And just for curiosity's sake, on the bottom right of this picture, you see some, does anybody tell me what they see in those cells?
Pollen?
That's pollen, very good. Judy, have you kept a bit of bees already?
No, I've just been reading a lot.
Very good, excellent, excellent. That's pollen, yeah, so there you go. And here's another picture of a frame in which you see some capped brood. You see two different types of brood here, right? Some caps, right? You see some flattish type of capped brood. And here you see some with, they're like bubble shape, right? You notice the difference? Well, you open up, it's pretty easy to tell. This is a drone. This is capped drone brood, and this is capped worker bee brood. The drone is bigger, and so when they cap it, they give it a bit more space. Is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
And here again is the other pictures of capped brood. You see some regular worker capped brood here, plus drone down below. And then when you see these things sticking out, they say the common thing is they say in the beekeeping literature is they look like peanuts. These are queen cells. So queens are the biggest of all. And when they develop, the bees will create a cell that is actually vertical, whereas all the other cells for worker and drone bees are basically they lay horizontally in their cell. The queen develops vertically in her cell. So if you see that, you know you got some queens on the way. So here is an illustrated what we've just been going through. This is for a worker bee in terms of days. See, they talk about days here, right? So it takes 21 days between the laying an egg and the hatching or the emergence of an adult worker bee. The queen lays the egg. The larvae sits there for several days, and at day 10, day 9 or 10, it gets capped, get a metamorphosis into a pupa, and then the pupa develops into an adult, and it emerges. That's important to know. So when you're looking at your frames, you're inspecting your hives. If you see eggs, you know the queen has laid an egg within the past 3 days. So at least within the past 3 days, you had a queen. And if you see larvae, you can say at least if it's a large larvae, at least within the last 9 days you had a queen, right? So because sometimes you open up your hive, you don't see any evidence of eggs or larvae, and you start to worry, have I lost a queen? And as a beekeeper, that's a big deal. You want to make sure you have a queen. You don't want to have a hive without a queen. So here again is a comparative chart of the time it takes for the different casts to emerge as adults. So the queen doesn't take that much time, 16 days, a little over 2 weeks. She's fed a very rich diet of royal jelly all along. And royal jelly is a richer food, whereas the others are fed a lighter version of royal jelly. And that's why any egg that is that's fertilized can become either a queen or a worker bee. They're all females, but the queen develops fully into her reproductive organs are fully developed only because the bees have decided to feed that one better. So basically, the worker bees are just arrested. Their development has been arrested. They're not fully developed queen bees. Any questions there? Okay, so these are good things to know. If you see a capped queen cell, you know they cap a queen cell at day 8 and she emerges at day 16. You got only 8 days to do something about that, maximum. And maybe you're just 1 day away from her emerging. Because when a new queen emerges, that can throw things off in your hive. You have to keep an eye out for that. We'll discuss that later. So now we talk about swarming, a very important part of honeybee biology. How many of you out there have ever seen a swarm?
Never.
No. it's quite a phenomenon. I've only seen a couple in my life. Once when I was in Africa, I was living there, and it was right close to our house, big cloud of bees, very exciting. And then another second time just last summer, my first swarm ever that I've seen and witnessed from my own hives, because I've had some for sure, but I'm never there when they swarm, and I miss it all the time. So it's a fascinating phenomenon. The bees do this. Let's quickly go over what swarming is all about. It's a very important part of bee biology. So you need to know that we're in humans, we talk about the individual in humans as being people, right? Me, you are all individuals. We reproduce, we make babies. The babies are individuals. For honeybees and for other social insects, it's not the individual. Like a worker bee is not a reproductive unit, right? Nor is a drone by itself. It's the whole colony that is a reproductive unit. So worker bees, honeybees, in order to reproduce, they need to create new colonies. Otherwise, they're not getting anywhere. If you just stay in one colony forever, all it takes is one tree to fall on your hive, and that's it. The colony is dead, or a bear to come along. So, and their survival, it is in their interest, the survival of the species, to create new colonies and spread the risk of eventually extinction. So swarming is how they do that. You start with one colony, and then you swarm, and you have two. And if it's a nice summer, it might swarm again and again. So one colony might hive off literally 2 or 3 other colonies over the course of the summer. And at the end of the summer, you have 3 or 4 colonies where you had one at the beginning. And this is what wild honeybees do. And it's what the honeybees in your hives will want to do as well. So increasing the number of colonies reduces the risk of extinction or local extirpation. Extirpation is a word I learned when I studied biology. For those of you who didn't, or it means local extinction. For instance, if on PEI, Prince Edward Island, there were honeybees, but I got rid of them all, they would be extirpated from PEI. They're still living elsewhere, but no longer in PEI. So when do they swarm? Well, typically they swarm when conditions are good, May and September. I think when I first was dreaming up this presentation, I said August, but I switched to September because my hive swarmed in September this year. The swarmer conditions are good. When they have a strong hive and high population, lots of bees inside the hive, they have lots of honey in there, there's lots of flowers with nectar. Whoops, let me go back. So those where conditions are good. Why do they do this when conditions are good? Because swarming is a very risky thing to do. Think about it. You have a hive, walls, you have comb, nice combs of wax in there. You have lots of pollen that's stored. You have a high population. You have eggs and larvae. This hive has all it takes to survive the coming winter. When a hive swarms, they leave all that. They leave their house. It's like your kid. You leave your parents. All you've got is a little backpack with a couple of sandwiches, and you go off into the forest, and then the winter's coming, right? So you have to find a place to live that's suitable. You have to build up enough reserves to survive the winter, and to store honey, you have to make wax. And you come up to a hole in a tree somewhere, there's no wax in there. You have to make the comb, and making wax for bees, it costs a lot energetically. So it's a very risky population. Recently, I've been reading a very good book on the wild honeybees and how they survive. And the author lives in upstate New York, not too far from here. And he did exhaustive studies. And he calculated that I think it was 27% of swarms survived their first winter. So most of them died. It's just so risky. So the swarmer conditions are good. So how do they do it? Well, when the conditions are good, the worker bees will prepare a new queen. They'll feed one or more larvae a diet of royal jelly. And as we saw in an earlier slide, you'll get all these queen cells, right? In a few days before the new queen emerges, or it could be more than one, they can produce several queen cells at the same time. So a few days before they emerge, the worker bees will stop feeding the old queen. So she's going to stop laying eggs, and she'll lose weight because the old queen, when she's laying eggs, she's quite heavy and she won't fly so well. So they need her to be fit for flying. So when all the conditions align, the queen will take flight, and she'll be accompanied by maybe half of your worker bees. And before leaving, these worker bees, it's like their backpack full of sandwiches, right? They're just going to fill up with honey. And the weight of a bee can double. A bee can double its weight from the honey it gorges itself with. And then they take off and they look for a place to go. There's a whole, again, I'm talking about the same author. I will probably refer to him later. He wrote a very interesting book on how a swarm finds a new place to stay. Oh, he's amazing studies there about that. So it's a lot of work. So the bees leave the hive and they'll alight outside the hive, maybe 2 meters away, which was my case last summer. They were right behind me, or it could be a kilometer away. They could be on a fire hydrant, in somebody's car, on the house, or on a branch in a tree. Scout bees then, from this big group of bees, a few scout bees, maybe 100 or so, will start looking around in the countryside for a place to put a new colony. They typically look for cavities somewhere about the size of one of the hive boxes. And it may take them a few days to do that. And then once they find a place like that, once they agree on a new place, the scouts will guide, the swarm will take off and it flies to this place with the scout bees telling this whole pack of bees that are flying where to go. Usually they fly not so quickly in the right direction towards their new home. And the original hive gets a new young queen. So, because what happens is the old queen that leaves with the swarm, but it loses 50% of its workforce. So you can understand as a beekeeper, do you want to lose 50% of your workforce? I mean, if you ran a raspberry picking farm, and you have 10 hectares of raspberries and you got 200 workers because there's a lot of work and they're ripe, and all of a sudden half of them leave, you're going to lose a lot of those raspberries. You just won't be able to get it all done. And that's, as a beekeeper, when you lose all of those bees, you're not going to be getting as much honey as you normally would expect to get. So any questions about honeybee biology? Because we're going to move on to equipment now. Come on, I said, thanks, Drew. I was just going to say, I did say when I advertising this class, I wanted to be interactive, and so too, whatever. I realize that you're such a good teacher, you have no questions, but do feel free to jump in anytime. Judy. Oh, Mike.
So with the swarming, obviously, I don't think that's something that you want unless you're trying to get them to swarm. Like, so when you see those queen cells, should you get rid of them?
That's a good question. And exactly, that's the question a beekeeper will ask him or herself when they see those cells. Oh, are they getting ready to swarm? And do I want to do something about this, right? Is it too late? Because sometimes it could be too late to do something about it. You have to be sure, though, if they're getting ready to swarm, it could be also that their old queen is dead. She's very sick and they're just replacing her, right? So you gotta play that one correctly. You can't be getting rid of all your queen cells while your old queen is dead. So that's not gonna get you ahead of the game, right? So that's a bit of a over experience. You get to start getting an idea whether it's one or the other. Sorry, Michael, I think you had a question.
Yeah, about the swarming, I was wondering how that ends up working in the case where you have, in our case, we're kind of in a neighborhood that's very sparse. Yeah. So most of the houses are, 50 to 100 meters apart. And I was wondering how that tends to work in terms of, like, let's say, relationship with your neighbors. If you suddenly then have a swarm and all your neighbors are sort of like, oh my goodness, there's all of a sudden
yeah.
Is that a common thing, or is this really the exception to the rule? Is it something that you need to sort of preemptively address?
It's always it's good to be a good neighbor if you have bees, and depending on how close if you're on the countryside, or if you're on a low density residential area, there's likelihood you already have bees out there. There's someone else keeping bees. The bees will operate within more or less a 5 kilometer radius from their hives, right? So you may not have bees, but if you went into your garden last summer, you probably noticed honeybees in some of your flowers, right? So they're out there. Here in the city, I see honeybees in my flowers. And so there could be a swarm from another operator. You can always say, hey, how do you know that's my swarm? I don't know. It could be someone else's swarm. But you're right. You have to, it could alight. The swarm could alight in your neighbor's, right there on the top of the slide that goes into your neighbor's pool. And they'll get all excited about that. Or it could alight up high in a tree. No one's even going to notice there's a swarm up there. You never know. Go ahead.
I don't think we've ever actually seen any honeybees. We've seen a lot of bumblebees, and we have a lot of flowers around here that are in bloom from like early spring until late fall.
Okay.
And so I don't believe you've never seen honeybees, no. And we've seen a lot of, see if I get this right, are they hornets or wasps? Or wasps, yeah. So we've seen a lot of wasps.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
other than that, never a honeybee.
No,
Maybe we're okay.
well, you sure you can identify a honeybee when you see one?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, because so
Like,
often there's a
she kind
confusion
of
there.
knows probably the, like, she can identify the bumblebees and stuff in terms of exactly the species. So
Very nice, very good. Okay, you can do that. Well, where are you located, Michael? I don't even.
we're in Cantley.
Kathy, okay, just up the road here. Okay, thanks. Okay, well, I think it's important to tell your neighbors as well if there's a swarm. When they're swarming, the bees are very docile. They're very docile. So they're not out there to sting anybody. They're full of honey. When they're full of honey, it's like you just had a huge pizza, and a couple of beers, right? You're like, oh, I just want to go lay down or something like that. That's how they're feeling. And they're not out there. They're not aggressive. So they don't have a hive to defend. So it's nothing to worry about. Of course, even you can tell that to people, they still get a bit of, could be hysterical about it. So that's all I can say. Sure, they're just nothing to worry about at that stage of the game.
Now,
go ahead.
say if there was a swarm, your neighbor did say, oh, I have a swarm, can we get a box or something? I've heard some people say they bring a box to their neighbors, put it near the swarm, and the swarm kind of attaches to the box and they take it away. Is that an option? Of
course. Swarms are valuable. I mean, it's a whole pack of bees there, right? So if you're a beekeeper, you love to catch a swarm. So you can do that. I'll be showing you a little video, I think, in another lesson of someone catching a swarm. So, okay, great.
I have a question.
Wondering if you notice that they might be swarming, can you set yourself up so that they most likely will just move to another hive box you set up? Like, will they do that, or you can have two?
That's the fantasy of every beekeeper, the swarm goes right into one of your boxes you've set up directly for that swarm. Oh my God. Exactly. I mean, it can happen, but those bees, they tend to do what they want, and you can try to lure them with, people say you put different essential oils in there, and maybe that attracts them or whatever. I've got a box near my hives, nailed to the side of the garage up there, and apparently meets all the specifications to attract bees, but I've never in 4 years, I've never had a swarm in there, so you never know.
But isn't it, if you were to find the queen of that swarm and you put it in the box, the drones and whatnot will follow her into the box?
They will, but try to find a queen when you have like 20,000 bees in a big pile.
Yeah.
You dig around, look for the queen. It's not that easy, but they all stick together. So let's get into swarming a little later. What we're talking about in greater detail. I think there's someone else with a question.
I might have a question.
Yes, Vlad.
Yes, I was wondering, is there any time during the year that the queen stopped laying eggs?
Yes, around September, she'll stop laying eggs. And so, the bees that go into winter, they're the ones that survive throughout the winter. But she'll start laying eggs again, probably January, March. She'll start laying slowly more eggs again. So as they prepare for the spring that's coming.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's quickly go over the equipment. I'm conscious of the time right now. I don't have a watch with me. I should have one. Anybody can give me the time there?
5:40.
5:40. Okay, let's move along here. Moving along. Now you know about the honeybee biology and how they work. Now let's look at the hive system that we've developed. I say we human beings have developed. It took us thousands of years, because for thousands of years we've been keeping bees instead of just looking for bees in the wild and stealing the honey. It's been several thousand years that we have evidence that we've been keeping bees in clay pots, in those, what do you call those straw, is it keps? Keps, I think I should know this. You see pictures of the old style the hives. And only for the past about 150 years, we've been using what we call here the Langstroth hive. It's, people have been thinking around with this model and changing it and trying to prove it, but this is the basis of, this is what most beekeepers use today. By far, I would say 98% of beekeepers, and it's very useful. There's a lot of, it's amazing how, it took so much time to figure out how to keep bees without having to destroy the hive. In the past, to extract the honey, you basically have to go in there, rip out the comb, and you basically could kill the colony while you were doing it. It was very difficult to just take the comb out and not kill the colony. And also, as I said earlier, the comb is a very, very valuable thing. The comb is the container for the honey, right? So the bees, before storing honey, they have to build the containers, and it takes a lot of effort for them to build a container. And if the beekeepers are out there ripping out their containers and breaking all their containers every time they get the honey, the bees are spending a lot of time rebuilding the containers every time they want to store honey. But with this hive, you can actually extract the honey without destroying the container. That's great. You take the container out, you open it up, you empty the container, and you put it back in the hive, and the bees just have to refill it again instead of having to rebuild it. So as a beekeeper, I encourage you all to get one of these great hives, and let's just go over the pieces of this hive. You see one at a time here. So you start with a hive stand. In this case, it's whatever. It's just a square with a landing board here, but it could be anything. That could just be a couple of cinder blocks. It could be pallets you find at the back of some store. You put it on the ground, and you can use that, right? The hive stand itself is just a place that allows something on which the rest of the hives will sit. Then you have number 2, the bottom board. That's the floor of the hive. So if anything falls in between the frames, if there's a dead bee up here and it'll fall, or any pieces of wax or whatnot, it'll fall and end up on your bottom board, right? And the bees will tend to clean out the bottom board. They'll take the stuff out and dump it outside. But after the winter, these bottom boards are really dirty. And as a beekeeper, you want to scrape that clean and make sure it's clean. Now, 2A is a screen bottom board. It's an option. You can have a wooden bottom board. It's just a piece of wood, or you can have a screened one where the air circulates. Under the screen, you can slide in a piece of wood or something to keep the air from circulating, especially in the winter. But a screen bottom board, I have a few hives with the screen bottom board. I like them. And as soon as my old ones rot away and my wooden ones rot away, I'll buy more screen bottom boards. I think it's good to keep the hive clean. If you get some dead bees falling there, they tend to dry up instead of get moldy. I like them. And then after that, you have number 3, which is called the hive body. This is a deep one. Look at number 3 and number 5. They're both exactly the same piece of equipment. One's just bigger than the other, right? You call it a deep one, and number 5, you call it a medium hive body. So in this is a generic piece of equipment. It's a box in which you have 10 frames. You can just see they're illustrated here, the frames. They just slide in like files in a filing cabinet. They can be used for brood or for the honey. They're interchangeable. Most beekeepers will use 2 of these for their brood where the queen lives. The brood is where the queen lives. She lays eggs where they raise the young. Then we have a queen excluder, number 4. Now, how do you keep the queen from moving up beyond the queen? What's special about this queen excluder, you think, that keeps the bees, the queen from going up?
That's too small. They can't get through the holes.
Very good, Laura. Excellent. You also get a star today. The queen is bigger, we know, and so she can't fit through the spaces that have been created in this queen. It's like a screen, right? The drones can't fit through either. So the worker bees will fly into the bottom here, into the hive, move up the brood chamber if they're full of nectar, and they'll come through the queen excluder, and they're going to deposit the nectar up here. The queen excluder comes in different styles. Could be plastic, could be metal. I've got metal ones. Then number 5 is a hive body. That's where the honey, that's where you can just call them a box, right? Those boxes. This is a honey box or a brood box. These are placed above the queen excluder, and this is where the honey is stored. You don't want to have eggs in there. You don't want to have larvae in there. That's why you put the queen excluder, because at one point at the end of the summer or when they're full, you'll be extracting, you'll be taking this out, taking the frames out and extracting the honey, and honey with larvae in it and is not toxic. It's probably even better for your health than pure honey because it's got proteins and whatnot. But if you're planning on selling it to people are giving it, they probably won't appreciate that kind of stuff in the honey. So, you know, that's why we have a queen excluder. Yes, Lara.
I'm curious why they would continue filling up with honey these spots when the queen bee isn't laying eggs there. Don't they notice that there's no egg there? Or?
Well, you know, that's why we like honeybees, because that's what they do. They just store honey. That's what they're programmed to do. Store honey, store honey. Like, you know, beavers gnaw on trees, they gnaw on trees. Okay. Honeybees store honey, and they will work at it because they know there's a period of dearth coming. They, you know, they realize that when the going's good, they store as much honey as they can, because there may be a period where the going will not be so good, like winter. So they store honey, and as long as there's room to store it in, and as long as there's nectar flowing, they're going to be storing honey. So 6 is an inner cover. So once you got bees in here, you put this inner cover, because the bees, they also, when they're in the hive, they'll stick things together. They'll block holes with propolis. It's kind of like a bee glue. And so by putting this inner cover here, the inner cover will get stuck to the top a little bit. You can always pry it open with your hive tool, but then you can put an outer cover, which keeps the rain and the snow off your hive, over the top of your inner cover. And it's easy to remove your outer cover. You just lift it up with your hands. So this is a combination of a roof, basically. And having an inner cover with a hole, it allows you to do things that we'll look at later. So those are the last 2 pieces of your typical bee hive. That's the hive's roof, of course, yeah. In the winter, you'll probably put some insulation in there. We'll talk about that later. So also you'll have this little piece called the entrance reducer. It's basically a stick you put down at the bottom where the entrance is, and by rotating it 90 degrees, you can have a small entrance or a larger entrance, depending on you know, what your needs are. In the winter, you'll have a small entrance because you're reducing the drafts going into your hive, but you still need a bit of air coming in. And maybe in the summer, if the colony is weak, it's being attacked or by other bees, you put maybe a bit of a larger entrance, whereas the bees can come and go with their pollen and nectar, but it's easier to defend. So this is what a box full of frames looks like, right? I said it was like a filing cabinet. You just slide them in, and the frame here is got what we call foundation. It's basically a piece of wax and or plastic, and it's embossed on it is our little hexagonal shapes of the exact size of the cells of a colony of comb. So that guides the wax making of the bees. They'll be encouraged to make wax exactly on both sides of that sheet. And they'll draw out the cells in which they will lay eggs and store honey. That's what it looks like in someone's hand. This is a clean, just purchased, you know, it hasn't been used. And then this person will put that in the hive, and the bees will draw out comb with that. Okay, this is a quick little video, just 2 minutes. This guy kind of takes it apart live, so you get to see what it looks like. And let me see, this is new here. Here we go. So tell me if you hear the sound.
Yep.
Okay, good. It's just 2 minutes.
No, I'm not hearing anything. Sorry, I spoke too soon.
Okay, nobody's hearing that?
Nobody.
Okay, all right. Well, at least maybe I'll comment then, okay? So let's just do that. First of all, I can hear him, so I won't hear him anymore. Okay. So he's lifting his bottom board there. His bottom board is attached to the brood box, right? With these little clamps. So I don't have that, but it's optional. There is his entrance reducer, right? The various sizes there are depending on your needs. You just flip it in the front there and slide it in. That allows, okay, I don't know what he's saying now, but you're basically, okay, now you have your frames. He's gonna pull the frame out. These are all brand new, never been used. They get quite dirty in no time. Typically, you'll replace those every 3 or 4 years. They'll get used a lot by the bees, and especially the brood box frames, but we'll talk about that later. There's a metal queen excluder, exactly the same kind I have. Keep the queen in there, keep the drones in there so that she doesn't lay eggs in the honey. Super. Any questions here? Any comments? when you buy your equipment, often it comes unassembled. So you have to bang those pieces together and screw them in so they're nice and firm and solid. And it's good to paint them. You should paint, you don't have to paint them white. You can actually paint it in any color you want. But typically they're a lighter color in case your hives are in the sunshine, they can overheat in the summer. So he's got his inner cover and his outer cover, which is a weird kind of model for an outer cover. I find that, you know, maybe he lives in an area where they don't get much rain and snow and ice, but there you go. So that's just a way of looking at what I just said, but, you know, in a 3D type of, you know what I mean? Someone's actually manipulating the equipment. Any questions?
Yes, I have one.
Yes, Lad.
If you decide to move a frame from the deeper box up to the shallow box, and the frame has some brood on her, are the worker bees are going to try to feed them anyway?
Yes, as long as there's brood there, they will take care of them. They will
Okay.
take care of them. I don't see why you'd want to do that. I guess there could be, you know what? Bees are interesting. You could experiment and try things. You can say, I'm gonna have 2 queens in there. You know, I'll separate it by a queen excluder, and I'll bring some brood up. And you know, you could try that. And you know, as you get comfortable beekeeping, you can try all kinds of things and see if it increases your productivity. Some people do have hives with 2 queens in them, separated by queen excluders, and then they have 3 or 4 honey supers on top in it. And it's in a way they can get more honey that way. What we're going through in these 5 lessons is very basic. I'm just giving you the structure and the framework for understanding how everything works. But everything we talk about has a lot more, you know, sub items you could look into and experiment with and learn more about. So I should have said it at the beginning. What you're going to learn in the next 5 lessons is plenty to start. But as you get into beekeeping, you're going to learn a lot more, and there's a lot more things you could do.
How many, so I looked at some of your Facebook and stuff like that. So you run 2 deep boxes. How many honey supers would you go through in a season? Like
Never enough. Never enough.
Never. Like, what should you start with as if I'm only going to have 1 hive? So
I think if you're starting from scratch, look with a new set of bees, with your frames are not full of drawn comb already, and the bees have the first year they got to work hard at just making comb. Yeah, one honey super is plenty. Yeah.
So I have a question. What do you think of these? Can't remember what they're called. I think they're the flow hives. And I think it's basically the honey super that has the mechanical bits to, you know. And I figured this is probably a loaded question, but I was wondering what your opinion was.
I mean, it's like an electric car, you know. Like, okay, they're new out there. Is it too early to adopt one? You know, there's, you know, how comfortable are you with, you know, all the details of having a new technology? They have to be worked out. I think, you know, they probably have advantages and disadvantages. I think they're a lot more expensive. I think it's harder to manipulate inside your hive when you have that. I haven't received much feedback. I haven't read much about those. They're fairly, you know, they've been out for 3 or 4 years now, I guess, and they haven't. I don't know how widely adopted they've been yet. So I'm not in a good position to give you much information on that. But they certainly make it look interesting, right? Just turn a handle and all your honey comes out. Perfect. You know, it's like if you had a vineyard and you somehow you ran a machine through your vineyard and the wine came out at the end, you know? That's
right. Because that's really what we're considering. So as long as there's no giant flag of being like, hey, these things don't work and it's a scam, then, you know, we'll probably do that and maybe get some feedback on it then.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, there must be people in the region here who have, I would strongly suggest you get on the Facebook page of Eastern Ontario, Western Quebec, and ask that question: who's got one? Where can I see these things in operation? So you can, or and talk to that person directly. Okay, let's move on here. I think. Whoops.
Mark, I have a question.
Yes.
So, do the worker bees store honey in the lower brood as well?
They will. Hold on. I'm just trying to get off of this slide here. There we go. Okay. The worker bees, yes, they will store honey down there. In fact, over the winter, you're just going to leave the brood chambers there. You're going to take away all the boxes with honey away, and you're going to leave them with just the brood chambers to spend the winter. And you got to be sure that they stored enough honey down there to survive the winter. So yes, they do. They store, you know, under normal circumstances, they can store plenty of honey down there to survive the winter, and pollen.
Will you be talking throughout the series about eating, like supplementary stuff?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
So let's I think I'm going too slowly here tonight. That's good though. I'm happy that there are questions. So just the basic equipment, a smoker, right? The smokers kind of distract the bees. They when they sense it, they scurry away. They fill themselves with honey. They're maybe thinking they might have to abandon the hive, kind of thing. So they tend to not think about stinging. And they also, it's kind of like shooing them away from it. If you want to look at something and it's covered with bees, you just put a bit of smoke and they'll go away. So that's a very practical little tool. It took me 5 years to figure out the art of keeping your smoker burning, you know, because it seems to be always going out on you, because you're not always using it. You put it aside, you're working, and then you need it, and it's not smoking. So, you know, so that's something to learn. Of course, your bee suit and gloves, generally recommended. I mean, you know, you see pictures of people working in their hives without any equipment whatsoever. And, you know, just for general inspection, you know, most of the time it's nothing to worry about. You don't need to have equipment, maybe something over your face. But the deeper you go into your hive, you know, the more likely you might bother the bees a little bit and they might want to sting you. Yes, I tend to wear it most of the time. Why? I don't know. Why take the chance? And a hive tool, very useful thing to have. So, you know, in the materials about this class, I say that those who sign up would have a discounts of a value close to what you paid for the course if you wanted to buy a deluxe starter kit. And, you know, this is I'll give you that information at the end of the course, but they give you these things. Give the starter hive I just pointed out, you get that, plus this kind of equipment, you get all that. And the discount is for shipping and plus a small discount on the actual price of the equipment. So you get a hive tool, gloves, suit, and smoker. So that's it for session 1. I've got a test now. So be careful. I hope you all listen. Here you go. You got to find the queen now. You got 10 seconds.
There she is, right there.
To the other side.
I don't know. I haven't found. I could never find a queen on this, but no. But it's a joke, of course. This is a medium frame. It's not a very deep frame. It's not as deep here, and full of bees, which is nice to see. When you pull that out as a beekeeper, you're happy to see lots of bees like that. What do I see here on this frame as a beekeeper? I see some cap brood right here. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's a good sign. It means there's a cap root there. I see this is what I call burr comb. When they build comb on places where you don't really want them to build comb, we call that burr comb. It just gets in the way. It's just, you know, if you're a very fastidious beekeeper, you'll pull these out, you'll scrape it with your little hive tool, you'll clean that up. Not necessary, but it does get to be a problem after a while. On the edges here, you see this here where my arrow is pointing, it looks like some sticky stuff. Both sides here, look at that. That's propolis, so that the bees will constantly be sticking everything together, you know, and so sometimes it makes it difficult to remove these frames from your hive to inspect, because as a beekeeper you'll be inspecting, you'll be removing frames, you'll be checking them out, look to see if there's eggs, the queen, and in doing so, you know, you look at videos often. I'm giving you a lot of videos from the University of Guelph that have a lot of excellent videos. And the guy there who shows you the video, it's like, you know, he just pulls them all out like that. It's so easy. Oh my God. And I go to my hive, it's like there's chewing gum everywhere in there. You know, I gotta wedge these things over, leverage them out. And I think he's already unstuck them all before he actually does the video. That's my guess. Some bees, genetically, they're different. Some of them have a greater tendency to put propolis everywhere, and some of them don't. Some of them have tendency to swarm more often. Some of them are more aggressive. So, you know, as an experienced beekeeper, as you get along, you might, when you're getting, say you want to buy new queens, you want to change the genetic makeup of your hives, you can all go out searching for people who sell queens and who are really good at it, and they will select for different characteristics, you know, and that way you can start more being in charge of what kind of behaviors your bees have. So there's the queen right there. And this is a picture of a nice queen running around on her comb. And here the queen is marked. I was telling you earlier how some people will mark their queen so it's easier to spot. To mark a queen, you have to catch her. When you try catching a queen, there's always a risk that you'll injure her or kill her. So I never bother with that. Every year, there's a standard practice that every year it's a different color, so you know how old your queen might be. So yellow is from you know, in 2018. So this is a two-year-old queen kind of thing. So I finish every lesson with some additional resources you could look at. You know, these are videos that you know, help you understand a bit more, or is better explained. It takes more time. The kind of protective gear, something about bee stings, the casts of bees. And it's not always University of Guelph, although very good. I've found other sources that are good. Before recommending these, I did look at a few, so I selected only those that I thought were half decent there. I don't want to waste your time with, there's a lot of people creating videos out there, and some of them are quite good, and some of them are not so good. So there you go. So next session is this Thursday at 5 o'clock. Same thing, same time. And I put my Facebook page there. I don't know if, have any of you seen my Facebook page for my bees?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that, because I put a lot of effort in that. I enjoy doing it. It's fun, you know. It kind of records, kind of like a diary of what I'm doing out there, and I add a few little extras from time to time. So you know, if you can always have a look at that if you get onto Facebook. This is a picture of a bee inside a geranium. I took this picture a couple of years ago. I really liked it. I thought it was a very lucky shot for me, because I'm not a photographer. So that was very nice. So that's it for tonight. But I'm happy to stay online here for you know, longer if we want to talk. You've got questions, if you have some personal experiences to share. So, and those of you who have other obligations, of course, you're obviously completely free to sign off, and I'll see you on Thursday.
Well, thank you very much. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Thanks, Mark. Take care.
Have a good night, guys.
I have a question about the timing. So the next one's on Thursday, and then the session's going to be always like 2 times a week, or what?
Yeah, it's going to be Tuesday, Thursday. So then with the last session will be Tuesday, 2 weeks from now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you.
I was looking at your Facebook page, Mark, and where you have your hives set up. It's going to be very close to what I'm going to be sort of setting up. Looks like in a sort of a wildflower field.
Yeah. Where are you located? Where are you located, Judy?
I'm just 10 minutes from Tweed.
Tweed. Okay. Oh yes, we spoke about that. Yeah, St. Thomas.
Yeah,
No,
so I'm
Smith.
in I got a really rural area and a lot of like a goldenrod growing and stuff where I'm going to put it. Do you mow around your hives?
I have one of those sticks with a blade at the end there. What do you call that? You know, what the Grim Reaper used, you know?
Yeah.
Scythe, that's it, yeah. And just, you know, I do that just to keep, it's important. We'll talk about that, I think, tomorrow on Thursday. You know, you got to keep the grass clean around there. You don't want your hive entrance to be covered by weeds and grass. And the honey you produce will depend on the flowers around you, right? So it'll be very much, the flavor of your honey is very much affected by the flowers.
Oh yeah, I got lots of wildflowers.
Yeah, so you know, the wildflower honey will produce one type of flavor. If you're I'm surrounded a lot, mostly forests, and it took a long time. I just discovered this summer there's a pretty distinct flavor of honey I have in July, and it's basswood honey.
Oh, okay.
It's
Basswood tree too.
You got lots of those, you know, because they flower beginning around the 5th or 7th of July. That's what I mean by being close to nature. You start you realize, oh, the basswood is flowering now, beginning of July, and then the bees, you know, and where I'm at, they don't make any surplus honey at all. The raspberries are flowering, the milkweed is flowering, lots of that. I don't see any accumulation of honey. But as soon as July 5th or 6th come along, whoo, in 2 weeks, they'll fill the box. You know?
From the basket.
Then you taste that honey and you look online, you talk to people. Yeah, basswood is very floral and it has a minty kick. And that's what I have. And then it goes down a bit. And then the goldenrod will flower. You know, mid-August, goldenrod is a more balanced honey. The flavor is more balanced. But it crystallizes. The goldenrod honey I collected this in September is all crystallized already, you know. Whereas my basswood honey is still liquid. So
really,
you can choose to mix it all together into one homogeneous honey, and that way maybe it'll reduce the incidence of crystallization. but you'll have one flavor. Now I have two different honeys. I can have the goldenrod, the balanced honey, or the one that has a minty kick to it, right?
Minty kick.
I have a question about urban beekeeping and whether how doable that is in
Well, we're going to cover that as well, the regulations. Technically speaking, and where are you, Lara? Okay, bye, Judy.
Bye.
Where are you, Lara?
I'm just near the Aviation Parkway, and where we only have one neighbor, and then we just have parkland all
nice
besides, and goes all the way back down towards the museum. So
yeah, I must be a walking distance from your place then. I'm right here at Kilberry and
oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So
you're on the other side of Saint Laurent Boulevard.
Okay, very good. So I know you're near the horse place there, the RCMP horse paddock.
No, we're higher up. We're on the other side of Hemlock, so we're that street that's like a tiny piece of.
No, I mean, listen. Technically speaking, you should be 30 meters from any property boundary, which in the city makes it very difficult unless you have a massive big. But having said that, especially if your neighbor, if your property boundary is just a big field, who's gonna bother you, right? So in rule of thumb, basically, in reality, I'm going to tell you it's not permitted. In reality, you put it there, no one's going to bother you. The city's not out there looking for beehives to it's going to say, oh, you're going to put you in jail or anything like that. And if ever somebody complains, it's complaint based, right? So if nobody sees it, nobody complains, no problems, right?
No, and it's completely hidden our yard, and the only one neighbor, I've talked to them, and they're totally keen on it. They don't have a problem with the idea, so.
And last year I was walking, there's a little airport, the Rockcliffe Airport there.
Yeah.
On the other side, I noticed a whole bunch of beehives inside the airport.
Yes.
Yeah, Michael, you're nodding your head there, yeah. So, there's a bunch of bees flying around, and whether they're, if someone gets stung in your neighborhood, you say, well, prove they were my bees. It could have been those bees, right? So it's like getting COVID, right? Prove it, you got it here or there. I don't know, but so. I'm not saying disregard them.
In my yard, my garden, I have lots of honeybees coming.
Yeah.
I see them, so
there you go. There you go. So again, the regulations don't call it. It say you can't do that. But I know the last course I gave a one woman. She lives like in the center town in Ottawa, and she had a hive. She kept a hive on the porch of her house. So
I was actually wondering if those were your hives, just because I've flown out of Rockcliffe a number of times and I've seen them, but I guess they're not yours. Although I do have a question then for probably the larger group as well as yourself is, what quantity of flowers are you planning your hives around? The reason that I ask is that we do have a lot of flowers like right around our house, and a lot. And our neighbor has a huge flower garden. But other than that, it's woods. And I wouldn't say there are a lot of flowers around. Like, how would you know if that's going to be sufficient or not? And I was wondering also, like, for the others, what they have in terms of access.
Well, I guess I'll start by saying that bees will find nectar. They'll fly far if they have to. I don't know if you do a 5-kilometer radius around where you keep your hives. Is it all just pure forest for 5 kilometers, or are there other fields and roadsides or whatnot? Where I'm at, I did a little bit of a back of the envelope calculation. I think it's 1%, 5-kilometer radius from where I keep my hives. 1% is like abandoned pasture kind of thing. Goldenrod, basically, right? And raspberries and milkweed, and the rest is forest and lakes. Yet, I get about 30 to 35 kilos of hive and of honey, and so they'll find. It depends what's well in the season. If it's a dry summer, it doesn't rain for 3 weeks, versus more amenable weather conditions. So I don't think you should worry about that. We'll figure it out. Anyone else have something to say about that?
Thank you.
Okay, Lara, I'll see you Thursday.
Yeah.
So the bees are good. They know what they're doing. That's the good thing about beekeeping is, you think, oh my God, it's not like keeping chickens, right? You have to take care of everything for chickens. Bees, they know what to do. you know, they're not a domesticated, they're not necessarily fully domesticated. They're still a wild species, and they know what to do. They know where to get their food. They know what to do when the conditions are good or bad. If their queen is old and sick, they're going to replace her. As a beekeeper, you can anticipate these things perhaps and accelerate accelerate what needs to be done. But if you don't, the bees often will take care of it themselves. One of the guys I met last year, he just stopped. He was selling equipment here in Ottawa, but he just stopped this year. Yes, his strategy is, I let them swarm. I don't know, I can't be bothered trying to control all the swarming all the time. I let them swarm. Maybe my productivity is not so high, but I always have new queens. When your hive swarms, the old queen leaves. You're always stuck with a new queen, which is good. You never have old worry about it. If you're controlling swarms all the time, the next thing you know, you have a queen that's 4 years old, and that could be a problem. Then you have to replace the queen. Not such a big deal, but you know, whatever.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, have a nice evening. Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, see you Thursday.
Okay, lad. Nice chatting there. Yeah, you're also up in Cantley area, aren't you?
Me close to Wakefield, more than close to Phillip Lake.
Okay, very good. So you're on the west side of the Gatineau River.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Michael, you're on the east side. Okay, very good. Great. All right, guys.
I
hope I didn't ask all the questions and
you gotta wait
to be asked.
Yeah, wait till we cover them in the next classes. You can always send me an email and I'll tell you. Don't worry, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm also trying to plan for this, so it's kind of like, don't want to get to the point where it's kind of like, yeah, so we should get going with this, and it's like, no, it's too late. You've missed the order date or whatever, you know. So just to make sure that everything, like,
yeah,
you don't get caught by something like that.
You have to get some bees, right? And you know, often people will order their bees now for the spring, whatever. And but you know, there's producers out there, and you should still be able to find some nukes. We'll talk about how to get your bees. I think next lesson we do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Again, if you use Facebook, you know, Facebook, some people are totally against it. I understand that. I have my reticence too about Facebook, but it is useful, very useful. The Facebook Beekeepers of Eastern Ontario and Western Quebec, a very active group, and you ask a question there, people answer, and sometimes they give you funny answers. You know, you can't trust everything you get there, but at least, you know, where do I find this? Who's got that? Whatever. And you say, I'm looking for nukes to start my bees next year, next spring. Where do I get them? And then you'll get 10 people who are going to say, talk to this guy, talk to that guy, or I'm selling nukes or whatever.
Yeah, that's fair. It's just sometimes I do find that, you know, you can watch the social media and everything and you get, let's say, a bit of a bias where, you know, you see everybody's posting all the problems where it's like, oh, this hive died and that hive died and all of these sorts of things. And you could easily be misled into thinking that it is a lot more trouble than I think it really is. And so this is why I think it is definitely valuable to have this information from you, because it's kind of like, you've been there, done that, and it's like, yeah, this could happen, but you can be the one to give the guidance on, like, yeah, it's not really that common.
Sure. Yeah, but you know, even me, I've got my biases too, right? So, you know, I remember we work with foresters, and they would say, you know, apparently there's two types of trees: a black ash and a white ash, and they were hard to tell apart. And you're walking in the forest, and the joke was, how do you know if it's a white ash or a black ash? And the answer was, just ask one forester. Because as soon as you ask two, you're having arguments.
Yeah.
So beekeeping is a bit like that too, right? Some people, oh, I've done like this all my life, it works, well, I do it like that. But you know, you'll end up developing your own level of comfort. And it's because the bees are very forgiving, right? They will, as long as you make sure they're healthy and that, you know, they're healthy and they go into the winter with enough reserves and their hives are in good condition. You know, you shouldn't be a problem, right? The rest is all almost secondary. The rest is all about what to do to maximize your honey production, right? That's your main objective. Some people don't do it for the honey. They do it just for fun. They don't care about the honey, which, whatever. But,
well, my wife likes honey, so, you know, I'm sure if we get like 35 kilos of honey out of the thing or something, she'll probably eat it all.
Whoa! You'll get diabetes if you eat too much honey. It's just sugar.
Yeah, hang on. Let me pull my insulin pump out.
Yeah,
So I won't be
exactly.
eating much of it, but
I
just what
started
it
making
is.
I started making mead, so honey wine, right? So yeah, so that's if you got extra honey kicking around. Oh, let's make some mead out of it, right? So
That's a neat idea.
yeah, I just made some. I made them last year, and it's very dry, and it's you know, it needs, and it's so dry. It's amazing. So I this year I made it differently. I went online, asked questions. I threw in some raspberries too. We picked a whole bunch of raspberries, so now it's going to have a bit of a raspberry, you know, accent to it. It's just now ready to be bottled. I have to bottle it, so I'm looking forward to that.
Well, you know, if you need someone to test that one out for you, you know, I'll volunteer.
All right, I'll try to remember that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thanks very much.
Okay, guys. Yeah.
Thank you.
Next class.
Michael,
Bye.
Vlad, Ray. We'll see you on Thursday.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.